So I'd like to call the work session to order. Tonight we have Public Works talking about the five-year capital improvement plan update. The Public Works Director, Mike Finkelmeyer, will provide updates on capital improvement projects for the near term and discuss the 2021 pavement preservation program. Right.
Correct.
So all you, Mike.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to talk a little bit about the capital improvement plan as well as the pavement preservation program, which is really mostly mill and overlay, but we'll just kind of jump right in. Oh, there we go. So we'll just kind of recap the major projects. As everyone's aware, the major project for 2021 kicking off this summer is the K7 and Eisenhower project. K7 and Eisenhower is on track. We've got our office check plans in now. KDOT has guaranteed their review of their plans by the 5th of March. So once their review of the plans is complete, we're going to release us to begin the process of property acquisition out there. KDOT has also approved our request to front load the project by bidding the signals and the controllers and the arms and all the stuff that we can pre-order so that we can begin the clock on the 6 to 9 month delivery time on that equipment. So when that equipment will start arriving, we're planning on still bidding the project this summer, and then that equipment will be hopefully en route when we release the bid so that we can start the program. There is a little bit of a development in that. The Kansas Department of Transportation has some additional funds that we are going to try to increase the local match from 1.68 million to a 90% match, which is a little bit closer to 2. So we will, we've got preliminary discussions with Leavenworth, and they definitely support the process of going forward to try to get more money out of KDOT, especially since KDOT strongly encouraged us actually to make that application. So that would be beneficial for us as well. Any questions on K7 and Eisenhower? Now we'll move on to DeSoto and 4H Roundabout. We actually have a contract with our property acquisition consultant, and they are we're working with our design consultant to finish up the exhibit so that he can go out and begin the process of acquiring property on the four corners on that one. That gets us one step closer to being shovel ready. So if there is the opportunity for additional funding, then we can pursue that. We did submit through Mark, but we were not successful. The project just didn't score that high. There's not a lot of pedestrian component in our roundabout at this time. It was always anticipated that pedestrian component would be a part of when the property at the corner on the southeast side was developed, and then we would utilize that to put in the pedestrian work. South Fork Drainage Tube, that's the large tube there on South Fork, and that's about a $300,000 project. We are going to start soliciting for design services so that we can get that project to start to move down the pipeline. And then a little bit farther out is the detention center ponds have been identified as needing some maintenance and repair. So we are going to start some of that process as well. With the push to develop there, we'd really like to get those cleaned up and looking better and fix some of the structural issues that are starting to occur. Some other things that are on the radar for the future. At some point, we're going to want to continue the work on DeSoto, essentially going from where we stopped south of Ida all the way to 4H. We don't really have a timeline for that, but that's, it's in really good shape now. But eventually, we'd want it to match the north end with the 3-lane section and curb and gutter. We do have some curb and gutter going up the hill to Mary, and we would just want to continue that on just to provide more capacity and a more modern geometry. We've talked about the K7 and Gilman intersection. We've been in discussions with Wilson. When we started the K7 and Gilman intersection, we were scheduled to do traffic counts after spring break of 2020. and then the world changed, and the traffic counts are still not normalized. I did watch the news tonight and noticed that Johnny Rollins was reporting that we actually had almost normal congestion in a couple places in Kansas City. So at this time, our traffic counts are probably still affected from COVID. And so we want to make sure that when we do make that submittal, that we make it in a way that is as favorable to our position as we can. So we're still monitoring it. The other one is the Gilman, which is essentially Willow to 147th. These plans have been on the shelf for quite a while. As you're aware, we're doing some property acquisition work out there in anticipation of development. So that's just something to keep in mind for, when development starts to occur, that will also push us to do some of the things that we do. Just a couple other items that are kind of out there. The 4-H and K7 pedestrian improvements, again, it's kind of a development-driven thing. If we do see some additional residential development there in the area of 4-H and DeSoto, we would anticipate we start getting more pedestrian, especially since we've got the library over here and we've got the middle school. I know kids don't walk as far as they used to, but it's definitely a possibility. So if we start seeing pedestrian traffic on 4-H, it may require us to think about adding some pedestrian facilities at the K7 and 4-H intersection. So that's just something to think about. I'd consider that more middle term. And again, these are development driven type things. And then the next one is the 7 Mile Creek Bridge. Of all our bridges, this is definitely the one that needs the most work. We also applied for some MARC funding on this one. At this time, it's in adequate shape. It's functioning fine. We don't have any significant, serious concerns. It's just that bridge is old, and with the geometry of the roadway and the traffic that we're anticipating, at some point we do need to come to an idea when we're going to do that. And we do have a agreement with Leavenworth County that bridge will be a cost fund project where they will help pay for some of it. So when that comes closer, we'll want to start those discussions as well. That, gentlemen, any questions on the major project?
Any questions? Don Studnicka.
Yeah, talking about that bridge there at 7 Mile Creek, wouldn't we want to wrap that together with the next phase of DeSoto widening and that all the way up to the new roundabout at 4-H? Do that all in one kind of felled swoop?
We absolutely want to make sure that whatever design we put in for the bridge will match the design for the roadway, yes. It does really start to add to the cost of the project, but if we could afford it, that would be ideal. What's unique about that is that bridge money, especially if we chase any federal or state monies in an actual different pot, sometimes they do have different pots of money. So sometimes we can be successful for a bridge that we wouldn't be successful on a roadway. But you're exactly right. Any improvements that we make at that bridge need to be done in such a way as to make sure that we can accommodate the roadway we want through there. And that bridge actually brings up another interesting point in that, we've got the Great Trail running from Eisenhower to Ida, but then we also have the Angel Fall trails running from Ida to Mary. So, we need to also decide how we want to address pedestrian type traffic. We for sure want to at least type a shoulder type. So if anyone wants to ride a bicycle, they would have the ability to get across there with a spot. But do we need a full blown pedestrian like we have on the Bittersweet Bridge is something that we would need to work out as we're moving forward on that project as well.
Well, I understand that, Mike, but if we should money or whatever get freed up from the feds or somebody, we can jump in there and do the bridge. We need to match it so that we get the 3 lanes or whatever, but we ought to do what we did on Gilman on the east side over there. We built that bridge. We put pedestrian sidewalk and fencing and everything on one side, even though it goes nowhere right now. In the future, that was probably what we'd want to do here too, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We want to build the bridge to accommodate the section that we envision. And I don't think that would be any stretch for, sometimes the Fed likes to try to narrow these things down, but we've clearly demonstrated that we're committed to this section through that area. So So if we do, we're going to build a bridge big enough to accommodate what we need for the future growth of Lansing.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Gene,
Mike, when you said that county has agreed to pay for some of it, do we know what some of it is on that bridge?
There is a signed agreement that calls for 50%.
Marcus, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Hey, Mike, from 4-H to the high school, is there still some talk or any talk at all about sidewalk? If we do that sidewalk from where you've got it down to West Mary up to the intersection of 4-H, pedestrian traffic, are we looking at future pedestrian traffic from 4-H to the high school?
When we develop that corner, sidewalks are a part of the development responsibility for the developer that comes in there. So we absolutely envision that we would continue our improvements and require some pedestrian access to the high school. That would, I don't know, I mean, that's,
But it's development driven is,
yes, yeah. Because we understand that the high school is also a pedestrian generator. So we're going to have to discuss that with the developer when that time comes.
Anybody else have a question? Is Ron on there? All right.
All right, next slide. These are the intersection upgrades. This won't take very long. As you know, we did the Ida Street. We're doing K7 in Eisenhower. Eventually, we would like to continue the process of just upgrading our radar detectors. And then we talked a little bit about the future of Gilman and 4-H at some point when we do any kind of development-driven stuff in that regard. I think the one thing I wanted to kind of put on the council's mind is to know that we're going to continue to plan on doing detector upgrades from our standard camera to radar. They're more reliable. They work better in inclement weather. And we're going to just decide Mary and Fairlane depending on, again, development driven. If we start seeing development at Town Center at Mary, we'll probably want to focus that one. Right now, Fairlane does kind of give us some issues every now and then. So it's just an ongoing process. So I just wanted to just keep everybody in the loop. That's what we're working on. Any questions? Not, I'll move on. So this is the big one, the pavement preservation plan. I did include a blow up in the packet, so it's a little bit easier to read. I put the 2020 on there so everyone could see this is the ratings that we did. And so this is how we develop our pavement preservation plan. There is one alibi I'm going to need to bring up on the pavement preservation plan. And speaking with Jeff, in 2019, we actually did a section of 8th Street south of, I believe it was south of Connie. We've got a little bit more that we might want to include as an alternate, in addition to the alternates of Hickory Trail, Pebble Beach, and 140th. So right now, we've got a $750,000 budgeted. The stuff in red is we're very confident that if our pricing holds steady and stable, those look like pretty high probabilities. The alternates, we always try to program some alternates. So if we get good pricing that we can move forward, I'll just discuss them all briefly. Hickory Trail is this weird, no houses at the very end, but the road is just absolutely falling apart. And so some of the thought was if we just took care of that, we could just kind of get that out of the falling apart stage. Pebble Beach is a little bit unique in that it looks like, there's the potential for development north of there at the next phase, coming to basically connect the subdivision to the north and the subdivision to the south. So if that comes to pass, we're kind of thinking, even though we're struggling with how to do that, do we want to let construction traffic tear the road up even more and then surface it, or do we want to surface it now so that it puts the pavement age of the new road at the same pavement age of the road that we just resurfaced, so that in theory, when the new road that is built is time to be maintained, we will then have this road immediately adjacent to it. We're trying to get away from a lot of the little, it looked like we were skipping sections. That adds mobilization cost to the contractor. Every time he's got to pick up his equipment, put it on a truck and drive it to a different part of town, that, that can be a cost from $1,500 to $2,500, depending on how far and how much equipment he needs to move. So that's part of the discussion process. That's why we're going to include that as an alternate. Again, these decisions will be made when when the bids actually come in, and the council will get a chance to decide on what alternates we're going to do. And then the last one's 140th Street. Again, this is another one of those. Sometimes we would, because the number was a 25 instead of a 29, we went past it, and we have these strange little stubs out there. And so now we're going to pay a little bit more of a premium to get to it. So we're just debating on whether or not we want to do it this year, or do we wait and then put 140th on the street when we decide to do Robin Road. It's more like one of those, well, let's see what it costs, and then we make the decision. So that's the 2021 mill and overlay as part of pavement preservation. Any questions?
I think it's notable how much West McIntyre is. I mean, that's a huge chunk of what we're doing this year, just that one stretch of road.
Yes. Let me back up. Did I? I thought I had pictures. Sorry. There's the photos. Yeah, West McIntyre. I'm gonna real quick. West McIntyre is unique. It was done as a petromat and a chip seal, and unfortunately, the petromat is failing. And when the petromat fails and just peels off the ground, that's real easy. When the petromat fails and is adhered to the asphalt surface underneath, we're starting to get some instances where the pavement is failing under the petromat and it's bringing it up. So we've discussed this. We've talked about this with our vendors, and Jeff and I have discussed it. We really think that typically, like when we did DeSoto last year, we just did an overlay on top of the existing chip seal because there was no petromat. And that's real good because the chip seal had a good adhesion and we weren't worried. We're worried if we did a traditional overlay without a mill on West McIntyre, we're really worried that we would get a petromat failure under a 2-inch overlay, and then we're going to have a real pavement pothole nightmare. So yes, unfortunately, McIntyre is taking up a significant portion of our mill and overlay, primarily because, one, it's wider than most roads in the city because it's not a curb and gutter. It actually has paved shoulder, and because it's got the petromat mill, which costs a little more. Now, because this is just one location in one spot, we might get an economy of scale when we do bid it. I was pretty conservative in my estimate. So that's how that goes. And then just some other ones I'm showing you. The North 8th, the alternate that I talked about as an alibi, north of Connie down the bottom left. We're starting to see some edge failures on that, and it also has some rutting and some alligator cracking. First Terrace, just north of Olive, that's got some really bad ruts. It's kind of hard to see in that photo, but that's more 2 inches deep, so it's holding water, and it's interesting to drive on. You can definitely feel the pavement irregularities. And then Valley Drive is just it's time. It's got quite a bit of alligator cracking. It's actually got a little bit of pushing. So
Good question on the petromat.
Yeah.
How much more of that do we have?
Hey, Mike,
It was a bad idea, I think, when it happened. So, I mean, I know we're replacing it as we go, but
yeah, that's a great question. I can definitely come up with a number. McIntyre is the largest section of petromat. 4H was a large section of petromat. I don't know. I don't think West Mary is. It's a chip seal, but I don't think it's a petromat. So we might be getting pretty close to.
Isn't there some kind of by Highland or Fairlane in those neighborhoods?
We ground up a lot of petromat last year in 2020. So yes.
Vince, any questions on the
I did hear
second half? Of the brief?
hey, Mike.
Yes.
So the Petromat failure a few years back with 4H Road, that is what happened to 4H Road, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Mike?
Yes.
And there's some Petromat on Valley too, north of Ida that's failing too, isn't there?
Likely, yes. We did use it quite a few places.
Okay, all right. And you were talking about Pebble Beach earlier. I don't know. It seems like we're in Fairway Estates neighborhood either every year or every other year. I mean, I don't get why we're over in a neighborhood that new so frequently. I mean, are we using the right asphalt over there or something wrong?
The section of, I think it's the section of Pebble Beach that's in the Holiday.
Oh, it's okay. It's in Holiday. It's still,
Yeah.
it's not an old neighborhood.
Well, this is, in Holiday. But one other thing I provided, if you look, I did provide a copy of our last paved streets.
Right. I see now. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, and did yours have on the back of it? Did it have dates? I think put a table on one of
There was-
Yeah. You put a color grid on it.
there was
yeah.
last page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
one thing I think on last page streets is interesting to note, and this is something Kelly and I are going to work on. When I said let's put together last page streets, what I should have also done is we're gonna add when the streets that have not ever been mill and overlaid, such as Wyndham, Ridge, and some of these other ones, because we've got records back to 2002, but somewhere in between 2002 and now, these other roads were put in place. So that we need to kind of get them into the database to show where they were as well. So when we say last paved, it could be last paved or installed streets. So that way we get a pretty good idea of the age of some of the streets. So, there's still a lot of streets. There's streets in here that are newer than 2002, but then there's also quite a few streets, as you can see, that are older than 2002, especially some of the streets in Ward 1. We need to, up in Old Richardson, we need to start working on some of those. And then, and the streets, around on this side too.
Any more questions?
Yeah, this is the 2020. I was just showing you what we did last year. And then this is, as we discussed, this is what we're planning on doing this year.
Yeah, Clean Drive is.
Yeah, let's, because as we've done in the last few years, we've done alley work, which is essentially turning gravel to asphalt. And Kane Drive is still gravel, so we were going to submit it also as an alternate, but as using the gravel to asphalt that we've been using on alleys, because it essentially is an alley. It's really just kind of a 1.5 lane road out there, and Kane Drive, and then we've got a little section in New Lawrence. Now, in New Lawrence, the county is actually going to pave all but like 500 to 600 feet as part of the Eisenhower program. So we're talking to them and trying to get it so that we can just pave that all the way to the city limits, so we don't have any more gravel streets that people address off of. And, it's still our intention to continue down the paving of alleys program at this time. We had some feedback on the alley that we did over by the activity center, but for the most part, I mean, it does improve those, and since we don't have a lot of traffic on there, we're really expecting a 20-year life on that asphalt when we put that down. So any other questions on 2021? So we also put together a little bit on 2022, just so you can see what's coming down. And these are not all inclusive, because this does not program the entirety of what we anticipate for funding. It's just some of our higher rated roads. West Mary Street is out there. That's going to need some work. We've got some work that needs to be done down in the down on the Southern Hills area. The problem with the Southern Hills area is there's so much curb. There's just a lot of curb in that subdivision that is just falling apart, which is interesting, because we were looking at the curb on Valley Drive north of 4-H, there across from Wyndham, and that curb is in a lot better shape. It's older. So again, it seemed like for a little while we just got some, it seems like around 2000 to like 2004, 2005, we've got some curb that's a little bit deficient. And also some of the other ones that you can see, when you looked at your pavement rating sheet or earlier, Rock Creek Loop is going to need some attention. Ida Street is starting to climb up there on the needing attention, as well as we identified that 140th Street. Robin Road is also down in that area. Robin Road also has the unique situation where we would really like to get that pipe down there fixed and repaired before we do the overlay, just because it's always nice to get pipes done before you overlay. And that, gentlemen, concludes my prepared part. If you have any question at all, I'd be happy to answer at this time. Probably go back to full Zoom now.
Anybody have any more questions? Marcus?
Hey, Mike, on that last slide you just showed, the Rock Creek Loop, what was that reference to? Is that curb? Did you say curb repair, the concrete curb repair, or?
No, Rock Creek Loop doesn't have any curbs. It's all, it just drains off to the side. It's just starting to fall apart. It's been a while. The one I was talking about was the Southern Hills. There's a lot of concrete curbs in the Southern Hills that is really starting to fall apart. When we did our curb inventory last year, that was one of our higher spots. And so, like we talked about last year, when we go in to do our mill and overlay, we replace the curbs while we're there. We go in there and that way it's always best to get the curbs taken care of and then come and overlay. And then pretty much if we've done it right and hopefully addressed as much as we can, then we don't have to touch that subdivision for 12 years plus.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, reports. Tim?
So a couple things. You guys might have seen we had a police vehicle in an accident a couple weeks ago. That got totaled out, and with our insurance proceeds, the chief checked in with Main Street Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, and they're honoring their price from January. So we were going to purchase another Durango. We were going to use the bids from January, and since they're honoring their price, they're still the low bid. So are you guys generally okay with purchasing a Durango to replace that Ford Explorer that got totaled out? And the chief is doing a good job. I know he was stripping out any equipment we could from that totaled out vehicle. I know there's some things you can't transfer from an Explorer to a Dodge, but I know the chief was doing a good job trying to get the light bar and trying to get any equipment we could out of that vehicle. So anyway, we would have 3 new Durangos this year. Secondly, the town center committee met over a Zoom meeting earlier this week, and we looked over the site plan. If you guys recall, when we purchased that property, we talked about a desire to have a really rough site plan just so we could see how things would be laid out. And I think that the committee felt pretty good about how that site plan was laid out, and we'll try to share that with you all soon. As a result of looking at that site plan too, I know the committee felt better about getting back to that prospect we discussed in executive session a couple months ago. So the committee felt like Matt, myself, and the mayor should get back to that prospect if you guys are okay with that. And then we'll report back at a future meeting. Can you guys give us a thumbs up if you're generally okay with that? Okay, great deal. And then one final thing. It's been really cool to just see so many new businesses popping up in Lansing, even in the midst of the pandemic. I popped into Base's Loaded Card Shop, which is on that little strip mall on Connie Street next to Sheer Greatness, kind of by where Harbor Freight's going to go. And I was just so impressed. If any of you guys have any nieces or nephews who love baseball cards, football cards, basketball cards, or whatever, I would really encourage you guys to check that store out. It was so cool too. I was able to buy baseball cards from the 80s. So all of those players that I really looked up to, I was able to buy baseball cards from the 80s. So that was neat. And also, Mayor McNeil and I went to an open house at Clearview Imaging, and they just did a great job uh, building their office space out at the Eisenhower Medical Building on Progress Drive there. And what's even more exciting about that, there's potential that they'll even expand even beyond what they've done so far. So I think a lot of times when we think about economic development, we think about rooftops, and that's very important, but also our daytime population is also very important too. And we've talked about how we have so many people who leave Lansing during the course of the day. And we talk about restaurants and things like that. You know, those restaurants need people to eat lunch there, to eat breakfast there. So businesses like this that bring in daytime population and employees, they're a really good thing for Lansing. So just really impressed with those two new businesses. A lot of really good things going on. That's all I have.
Okay, we'll go around the horn, starting with Don Stednica. Don, you just shut it off. I think you were on. I think you had your mic on.
Okay, you hear me now?
Yep.
All right, good. I'm sorry. Got my first COVID shot a little over a week ago, standing by for my second one. We should still think, I've seen, we should still, do all the protections that we can do. Mask, washing your hands, do all of that good stuff, social distancing. We're not out of the woods yet. We're getting there, but we just got to keep moving forward. That's all I have. Thank you.
Dave,
No, I have nothing.
got nothing? Okay. Gene,
Yeah, I just want to echo what Don says. Let's don't let up. And Mike, thanks for a good job tonight. That's all I have. Thank you.
Marcus,
Yeah, Mike, great job tonight. Yeah, I'd really like to talk to you about Rock Creek Loop too. We can talk tomorrow or something. But hey, great job, Tim. Excited about the committee meeting that we had this week, and excited to share that layout with all the rest of the council members as well. Thanks, appreciate it, Tim.
I think Marcus. Jesse,
Yeah, Mike, thanks for the presentation. We appreciate, you putting all your hard work into the presentation and just sharing all the information with us, and just especially the long range plan going into 2022. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Ron, you're up, Ron.
Very informative briefing. I too got my first COVID shot and am encouraged by the numbers going down, and I'm looking forward to getting back to normal as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. Gary,
Stay the course, everybody be safe, and that's it.
okay, well, I'll just make one comment. We had asked that everybody put up a background with the city of Lansing, Kansas on it. I'm going to congratulate Gene for being the only person to actually read that email. So if you guys will do that next time, I'd greatly appreciate it. So we can just
Teacher's pet, Kirby.
see your lovely faces. All right. No, I appreciate it. Thank you. And we are adjourned. Talk to you next week.
Good weekend,
Good
guys.
night. All righty.
It is, guys.